Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for coming out in this sweltering weather. It's really great to have you all here, and really want to thank our 5 artists. Not only do they make splendid, meaningful work, but they went through all of the deadlines beautifully, wonderfully. So thank you to Suzanne, Bella, Gale, Jane, and Carol. I would really like to thank my staff. We have Tracy over there in the corner, and we have Irene, who somebody has to be at the gallery, so being a rookie, that's where she is. She's not here with us, so Deb, make sure you record everything so Irene can see it. And John is here somewhere, John, who no longer is a paid staff member, but my husband, partner, greatest supporter is there at the front entry. So, we really should not have a show called Being Women. But, unfortunately, there is still somewhat of a problem with being a woman artist in the society, with some issues of inequality, being a woman at all. And you're all very aware of many of them, although we live in a very special place here. But starting to look around, there are definitely areas where women's lib hasn't quite reached, or has regressed. We've gone back in some ways. But the idea was because it's still a problem in the arts, in life, and especially for women sculptors. It's still a very closed world, the world of sculpture, and still very male-dominated. So that is what we want to discuss today. And we also want to find out from these wonderful, powerful women in their own right and in their own work, find out more about what keeps them going, what inspires them, what is important in their lives and in their work. So here we are. Even since we scheduled the show and started preparing, there have been more issues coming up, more news about women's problems. As you know, the NFL scandal, there always is some famous person abusing a domestic partner. It just is endless, so that is one end of things. Congress just refused once again to pass equal pay. So here we are again. Women are getting about 70 cents to the dollar for men, and as men do, and that is, it depends. In some areas of society it's actually worse, and in some it's not quite so bad. Interestingly enough, museum curators are about at that same bias. Women who do manage to get a curatorship at a major museum get about, on average, 70 cents to the dollar that men get. So even though in the arts it should be different, it really is not. And well, we are in a new war. So I have to say it. This is not, some people might say, well, it's not gender related. I think it is. I see some other people agreeing here. It's the decision to go to war, the whole integrity and ethics behind that, our role in the world. But it's also all the expenses, all the money that goes to the boys and their toys that is then cut from domestic programs and generally single women, children, etc. So I think we do get worried about that and concerned about that, and rightly so. even the new attacks on the right to vote, because a lot of women being single mothers, it's harder to get an ID, it's harder to vote the day of the election. So I think all of that climate is still very much an attack on women. The new laws against abortion, restricting abortion, and even contraception, which is now considered by some as murder. Hard for me to believe, but true. So yeah, some days it feels like the 50 years of accomplishment since the kind of the beginning of the heavy-duty feminism years. We've made a lot of progress, and then it seems like we're slipping back in some ways. Looking at the situation for women in the art is also very interesting. ArtNet recently had an article, and they asked 20 prominent women in the art world, collectors, artists, curators, etc., to tell them what they thought of the situation. Is there still bias, gender bias in the art world? There were some really interesting responses, but for the most part, I think all but one said yes. And we're way beyond the Camille Claudel situation, but we have situations where most galleries exhibit a huge majority of men, and it seems to be that the most established galleries, New York, Paris, will tend to have the worst statistics for their women versus men artists in their rosters. And even though more than 50% of art school graduates are women, women are very definitely underrepresented, especially in the top galleries, where you'll often find 15, 20%, sometimes fewer. There's a project that we got so excited here that we ended up yesterday copying all these posters and having them printed to slap them up on the walls for you. And this is just a small sampling, but this group called Guerrilla Girls started this project, and they had women from all over the world. I don't think they're all women, actually. They're artists and other people who decided to make these posters to illustrate the statistics, and they went gallery by gallery and museum by museum, and I think the illustrations are really, really fun and also very sad. So when you have a few minutes at the end, just walk around and look at the posters. I think it's really indicative of a systemic issue that we have. There are many reasons for that. Of course, there's a number here that was very surprising even after I was doing all this reading. 96% of modernist artists shown on museum walls are male. 96%. So it's that particular group. Now, if we go to the Renaissance, it's probably way, way worse. So there are many reasons, some of the reasons being the same as what happens in the world in general. Women are not supported in their careers with their needs as caretakers for their families, so we all know that. And there's outright sexism. But something was very interesting. James Abruzzo, who is a compensation consultant and recruiter, and he works with museums, he explains the pay gap for museum directors. Men are paid more than women because men ask for more. Duh. Interesting. And then there was this very interesting quote from Sarah James, who's a recruiter with Phillips Oppenheim, and they also consulted on this study, who said that women candidates for top museum jobs tend to explain why they're competent. And the men come in and they explain their vision and their ideas. And the boards are mostly staffed by men, and so they liked the visions and the ideas, and they don't need to know that someone is competent. So very interesting, because I think that these mindsets follow us everywhere we go. So I wanted to also say that some things that came out from that ArtNet article, some of the interviews, was more on a hopeful side. That women tend to be, because we tend to be the nurturers, we also tend to be the nurturers of community. And so women are making more waves as teachers and shapers of culture. And also, when you look at collectors, the important collectors in the world, there was a survey of 14 of the billionaire collectors, only one was a woman, but of 10 of the main collectors of video and new media art, 9 were women. So it's the trend, the women may be more visionary. It's interesting, isn't it? So, time to turn to our panel here. And wanted to ask Suzanne, who is right here. You're primarily an installation artist. Yes. So it was really great to get Suzanne to actually come and install a piece site-specific in the gallery. And you'll see it. It's made out of newspaper. Goes up into the rafters, or comes down from the rafters.
And it's knitted.
And it's knitted, yes, yes, yes. Suzanne is just a woman, she knits.
Right.
Women are often seen as the weavers, the web creators, the nurturers of community. So my question to you is, how do you see your installation work in this context?
First of all, thank you so very much for your vision for this exhibition and for inviting me to be a part of this. It's been a delight to get to know all of these strong women and spend some time with you and your gallery. I have evolved as an artist, as most artists do. I started out as a painter when I went to college, because I thought that's what you did when you became an artist. And through the years, I got to know more deeply my own instinct and how materials and ideas spoke to me. And over the last maybe 10 years, I have been doing more and more frequently work which is defined by installation. But it's not exclusively what I do, but it is the bulk of what I've been doing. And within that, the idea of drawing others into projects has become more and more interesting to me. And I think that relates to what Brigitte was just saying, that women do tend to bring people together, make connections, that sort of thing. And one example that I'd like to share is that in 2011, I was invited to Poland, to the Central Museum of Textiles, to create something in this space that they had. They were pretty open, and so I went there, and via a friend who works at a university there, we rallied some students, some college students, who were interested in working with me and who maybe had no experience doing this kind of thing, but just were interested. So it brought us together in a way that couldn't have been anticipated. It was somewhat unplanned and a little bit arbitrary, but at the end, we all had a chance to create a little bit of a temporary community. In fact, I referred to the space where we did the work. We sort of reinvented the textile factory. This, for those of you who may not be aware, this museum was the first textile factory in Poland. It was created in the 1850s, and then in the 1950s, they converted it to a museum in commemoration of that fabulous industry that then started to wane with the advent of World War II. But at any rate, so it was a very participatory kind of thing, and I've actually heard from a couple of the students since then, different inquiries. So there was this lasting sort of relationship. My friend in Poland, she is now storing some 35 millimeter old films from the famous Leon Schuler film school that's also in that same town, anticipating another project. And I just had to email her about something else and said, I promise I'm going to get those things out of your basement in 2016. I promise you. But, and then another project that I did, which was in my hometown, I invited people who knit. I especially focused on older women who knit, as oftentimes there's a certain invisibility that can develop as one ages. And I wanted to highlight these women who had this craft skill, invite them to do something different. We basically yarn bombed the bronze statues of animals in our hometown, and it took all different forms. I mean, some women were not able to make that leap. They've been knitting sweaters their whole life, and somehow to make something that would go on a elk was beyond their ability to conceive, and that was fine. But there were women who worked together in groups. The largest group was 18 individuals. We did have one young fellow who joined us, but as soon as he learned how to knit, he realized he wasn't very good at it, and then he decided. So it was basically a woman's kind of a thing, but it was certainly not restricted to women. So those are just two examples of kind of this collaborative, community-making, connection-making way that I have used my art to involve others and to really feel as if I've had a social impact. And some very interesting outcomes that do fall into that sort of, not exactly new media, it's kind of social practice. They sometimes use that word to describe these kinds of projects, but it...
Well, this actually came from that project in Poland that I read about in an article in Sculpture magazine.
Right. Well, while I was in Poland, one of the women that I've been working with, was very impressed and decided to take it a little bit. That's right, which is, I sent a note to the editor of Sculpture magazine thanking him for publishing the article because this is so great. At any rate, that's kind of,
Suzanne.
Yes, certainly.
Jane, in your work, you question the culturally formed notions of women's place in society, the notions of beauty, women's roles, and self-worthiness. Many of the sculptures have an element of writing. Does the writing relate to this topic? Is the writing mental space different for you than the sculpting mental space?
I too want to thank you for inviting me to this. This is pretty prestigious, other women, and I'm very honored to be here. I'm very interested in the role that women have in society, at least the role that is perceived that they should be in. And I'm interested in gender socialization and I guess the body, how we are labeled different body types, and how we're expected to live up to almost an unrealistic measurement of beauty. And then also, as I get older, I'm very interested in aging and how that affects women. And I guess women in particular, it's different than when you age as a man. So a lot of my work deals with that, and yes, the writing on a lot of my work reflects that sentiment. So my writing is more of a stream of consciousness. It's more of journal writing. It's not really meant to be read. I'll just scratch it, not necessarily in a linear movement, but I'll just start putting in things, going up and down and all around it, and it's really just to embed that message into the piece, and it's more of a personal development for me, and working with some of these issues, and it creates a texture, and it creates another layer. I'm really interested in layers and layers of layers of our body, layers of our lives, layers of our spirituality, and this just adds another layer to the work and kind of a mystery when you're trying to figure out what in the world did she say. And then in terms of my mental state on how
You mentioned the stream of consciousness and
Yeah, I do though. I am in two different states when I build versus writing. I do some sketching and I do some maquettes, but I try to put those aside when I'm actually building because I feel that I'm my worst enemy sometimes when I'm thinking too much when I'm working, and I do a lot better if I can just get out of my head and work intuitively, and the work is much more fluid, and I'll probably get halfway through a sculpture, and some of my tallest sculpture was 20 feet, so some of my sculptures are quite large, and so I'll get like halfway through a sculpture, and then that sculpture really starts speaking to me, and it's then that I start really working on what message is coming out of me, what's happening, what's developing. And so then I'll go back and make notes over what I want to write on it. And the writing is even though it's a stream of consciousness, it's like it's still much more in my head. You know, it's so I'm more conscious of what I'm saying and what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. Carol, the body of work created for a Being Women show began during your residency last winter at the Anderson Ranch in Colorado. You write, the series celebrates the wisdom of elders and explores the solidarity of estrogen, where hormonal shifts frame experience akin to the moon's influence over the tides. So now that you are a resident expert on estrogen,
me and every woman on earth.
Would you please share with us how the understanding of what estrogen does in a woman's body has informed your life and recent work as you're becoming an elder?
That's a natural hot. As we're all here, you know, suffering through the interminable heat. You know, it's a very interesting question because fortunately for me, I was 57 before I went through menopause. I followed in my mom's footsteps. I didn't think it was going to be anything. In my mid-40s, I was like read natural menopause, and I thought, okay, I'm ready, done. It's not really how it worked. And, you know, I started really suffering. It was hard to sit. It was hard to be. And I thought, you know, I need some estrogen, but I don't want those HRTs, you know, hormone replacement therapy. That sounds really nasty. And my mom's kind of a Christian Scientist. And, you know, I grew up, no drugs. So I started exploring, and I would call my doctor, you know, I'm a Kaiser patient, and she would write me a prescription. You know, I never went to go see her or anything. You know, she'd just give me these drugs. I'd go pick them up and try them out. And eventually I got an estrogen ring, which was a bioidentical estrogen. And I thought, okay, I'll try that. 3 months on, you know, insert, go. And it worked. You know, I started feeling much better. I could sit. So as I was going and getting ready to go to Colorado, I had written a proposal and been accepted to do this 10-week residency. And, you know, I was gathering all these things out of my studio, and I reached over and I had some of these rings in my studio, you know, because I'd been using it for about a year, so I had 3 of them, 4. And I just grabbed them. I thought, wow, they're nice circles, and they're kind of donut-like, and they make great prints on clay. You know how clay artists always like to put things into their clay. And so I got them, and I got to the residency, and day 1, they give you a studio space, and you're kind of on your own, you know, and you're like, okay, so what am I going to do, right? Got 10 weeks in front of me. And I also was very aware that I was 59 years old and that I was going to turn 60. And I thought, yeah, okay. So make a piece to celebrate being 60. I grabbed some cardboard, and I've had this image in my studio forever, which was this series of planes, you know, and it's a beautiful, like, ikat silk. And I just have always wanted to kind of, you know, something like that, you know. So I got the planes of cardboard, I cut them in squares, and then I reached for the estrogen ring. I said, wow, what a great spacer, you know. I can make all those fins of porcelain look really cool. Strung it up on a bunch of string, and that was it. That was what I started with. And as I worked on it, it was suspended from the ceiling, and I thought, no, that's no good. Like, what you're trying to do when you turn 60 is, like, at least pretend like you have a foundation underneath you. You could go forward, like you started someplace and you got someplace to work from. So that's how it got a really solid base. And I don't know, I just kept working on it as the 10 weeks went on, and it evolved. And now I have a lot of information and metaphors based on, like what's coded in the material. And I think as an artist, we code information based on, as Jane said, based on our own personal exploration, growth, the unconscious coming forward in our lives, and attempting to make sense. And I've created stories for myself and also evolved new stories. Thank you very much, Brigitte. You gave me another one, Elizabeth, the woman who wrote the book. It's like, oh, wow. There's so many ways that as an artist I begin with an idea and then it evolves and grows and becomes something different. So a ring, there was a necessary part of my comfort on a day-to-day basis, evolved into this piece that says, I want to celebrate turning 60, I'm going to reach forward, and there's this element of, we're at the end, last phase, what are we going to get, where are we going, and how do we get there? And the idea of estrogen solidarity came to me when I realized that every woman, whether she's a newborn baby or an elder person, has estrogen in their bodies, and that we change always based on that estrogen throughout our entire lives. Our estrogen starts being made by our muscles and our fat in our body, right? And so therefore we get more fat because we have less from our ovaries, and the path to learning through the creation of art has been really a useful journey for me. And hopefully, the art in itself and looking at different people's art, you can kind of understand they're trying to stimulate questions. So the pieces are based on that.
Thank you, Carol.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn to Bella. In your statement for the Being Woman show, you write, the kind of work I do has often been attributed to a man or questioned as being inappropriate for a woman. Do you think the people who offer this observation are referring to the technical aspect of your sculptures or to the subject matter? Because I just don't see any male sculptors out there tackling your concerns with the angst our male-dominated society is visiting upon all of us. Don't see why it would be a male issue and not a female issue. And, the perpetual war state making violence look sexy and capitalism's manufacturing unnecessary gadgets. Your work is more timely than ever.
Unfortunately, yes. Again, thank you very much for inviting me. I do respond to materials, but not in a conventional female way. My use of glass and steel, the tension between them, have a lot to do with my sense of personal fragility. And I transfer that to the work that I do. As I said in the statement, that as a woman, I feel I have to reflect my society and reflect it through myself. And I have not worked in a community, but really been very self-motivated in the gallery. But I do want to interject two anecdotes. One, when I was 22, and I first decided that I was going to study sculpture. And we only had two friends in California. One woman was a psychiatrist and the man was a psychotherapist. And I was talking to him, telling how excited I got about making a sculpture. And he gave me this long look and said, "So, you got penis envy?" I mean, that really did happen. And then strangely enough, last evening I was invited to a party. There's been a group of sculptors that were selected for a group show in Greece. And Peter Sells was the curator. And the women there, I mean, he looks around, he says, I had no idea I was picking all these gray-haired women. Because he did not look at the names, the ages. And there were about 8 or 9 women to 2 men. And he went solely by images. Which, of course, he didn't do initially when he could have been more helpful. But anyway, I thought I'd throw this thing in because it gives you an image of what I've been dealing with. But in terms of the topics, my first war toy series was shown in Chicago. And this young man came up to me and said, you know, I'm surprised you did it. I mean, it's so masculine. And I said, no, it's making fun of masculinity. Who better than a man, than a woman to make fun? He walked away. So, you know, what else can I say? You have to ask a question.
Okay. Gale, well, you say a lot through your work, for sure. Gale, you say that the work for Being Woman was inspired by American gun lust. And you state, I think the idea that weapons are needed to keep the peace is a disturbing concept. Wow, yeah. You can just listen to the news and all these people being mowed down by the peacekeepers with the guns. Tell us how you challenged yourself to capture the essence of the gun culture and the place women have in it. And how do you create your disturbingly beautiful gun sculptures anyways?
Yes. How do I create them? Well, kind of what inspired this whole process too was being ignored in the art world, but I didn't realize I'm really being ignored because I'm self-taught, not necessarily because I'm a woman. I can remember so many times people, where'd you go to school? I didn't. And that was more of a strike against me than I think being a woman has, which is interesting. So, you know, I've always had to make art because of what bothers me or what is wrong in society. I'm not really motivated to make art just to make it. It has to say something, and if it doesn't say anything, then I'm kind of not that interested in doing it. So, and I don't know where that ever came from. I don't think when I first started making political art that it was about politics. Mostly, some of my earlier work was paintings, and it was more about how people interact in relationships or with each other in general, and how we deny reality and things like that. So that's kind of when I started making my most powerful work. And then I guess I kind of went from there into animal rights, and I did a show called Why Not Eat Your Pet, and it focused on all the atrocities we perpetrate on animals, everything, every arena where we abuse animals. And so, of course, that really helped sales a lot. And then, of course, I've been a professional artist forever, but I've never really, thought about making money at it. I just have always thought about, even though I've always thought about, let's just say what's on my mind. And the gun thing was partly oh, I'm vegan. Wouldn't that be funny if I changed my name to VGUN and just made guns? And wouldn't that be funny in the art world? Because don't they want a gimmick? But then I just really kind of realized, and also it was interesting too because I don't see very many artists making guns, and I didn't really pay attention to that when I first started doing it, but I realized the only thing I ever see out there is AK-47s if an artist makes guns. And so that's why I went for the Tommy gun, because I think that was our first mass shooter. So it's just an endless narrative for me now. Like everything as I kind of stumble onto whatever political annoyance is out there that I find, it's just endless of what I can do. And then what usually happens is when I go to somewhere else, it's not because I'm done talking about it, It's more because something else seems more challenging. And technically, the guns were really challenging to do. I've never really worked that much with aluminum, and that's been really hard. And then also the steel pieces were okay because I knew how to weld and do that stuff, but it required a lot different machinery and stuff to do the aluminum. So, yeah, so I just kind of feel like there's so much to talk about, and it's timely also, especially the one piece that's been the most popular piece I did is Last Rites, or the metal version of that was Till Death Do Us Part, and it's a gun where you basically pull a trigger and you kill yourself and somebody else simultaneously, which is really practical, you know? It's one shot. That's all you need. You don't have to worry about turning that gun around or dropping it or anything else. So.
Well,
Right.
humor, yeah. Yeah.
Well,
you
I
get away with it because you have a splendid sense of humor. And you know, so does Bella. It's really interesting to put you both here.
Yeah, we seem to have very similar concerns.
Yeah,
My war ties
yeah,
and yours.
yeah, yeah.
Late. And unfortunately, they are ever so timely. But I think, you know, I've been in the arts. I've taught art for 35 years before I retired, and I'm really steeped in modernism. And I realized recently that some of my work, not particularly the pieces here, really are based on my modernist influences. They're constructivism, but they're really about machinery that's being destroyed or not functioning. So it's deconstructivism. and surrealism, there's surrealism in there, and there's some cubism because I shift planes and make, and suddenly I just worked that way, and it's just the other day I saw the synthesis that I hadn't seen before, which I'm now sharing with the world.
Good, thank you. Great.